On a quiet morning in Alexandria, with gentle breezes drifting in from the Nile, Meryt sat by the window and looked out. Sunlight threaded through the leaves, picking out the city's ancient temples and splendid palaces. A woman in her 30s, Meryt had lived a peaceful yet lonely life because in ancient Egyptian society, age and the absence of a family were a burden, while young girls were regarded as a precious gift to powerful families marriageable and able to bear children to sustain the lineage. Meryt was considered a surplus woman. She had never married, had no children, and in the eyes of society she had lost her value. The ancient Egyptians judged women not only by beauty, but by fertility and their capacity to bind a family together. A woman without husband or children was like a thorn in the system, overlooked, seemingly without a place. Meryt was not without beauty. On the contrary, she possessed a quiet grace, keen eyes, and smooth skin, yet that beauty could not save her from oblivion in a world where the survival of the bloodline and family alliances was paramount. She had long passed childbearing age and thus did not suit the political marriages society expected women to fulfill. Sitting in her small room, Meryt asked herself whether she truly had no worth in this world. Each morning she faced the fact that she had nothing to leave to the next generation save faint memories. Other women of Egypt's royal sphere, Cleopatra, Nefertiti, Hatshepsut, were celebrated for their positions of power, their husbands and children, and the admiration of the world. Meryt, though talented and intelligent, was merely an ordinary woman, living quietly in a harsh society. Yet she knew that ancient Egypt was not only the realm of young women, it was also home to formidable women who, even without children, could build careers and wield power. There were women like T, who had no family but still held tremendous influence at court. They did not need to bear children to prove their worth. Instead, they could manage estates, conduct religious rites, and even intervene in politics to keep the country stable. Meryt no longer hoped to marry or have children, but she refused to become anonymous. She resolved to set out and find her place in a society that made little room for unmarried women. Without a powerful husband or heirs, she understood she could still rely on her intellect and life experience to carve out her own path. She began to meet other powerful women of the palace, women she had scarcely noticed before. She learned how they built careers, managed wealth, and held on to power without leaning on a man. These were women who not only stood behind dynastic strength, but who also took the lead in managing and steering Egyptian society. Meryt started attending council meetings of the temple administrators, where crucial political decisions were made. Though she lacked a large family or a powerful husband, she began to emerge as an important advisor, exerting considerable influence in managing royal assets and overseeing cultic rites. She learned to wield political finesse, maintaining ties with other leaders without depending on marital alliances. She also joined in managing royal lands, where she could preserve her leverage through deft division of property, guiding trade, and even supporting the pharaohs in diplomatic strategies. Over the years, Meryt realized that in ancient Egypt not all women drew influence from marriage and children. Many rose by virtue of intellect, leadership, and the ability to seize opportunity. Part 2. The Truth About Unmarried Women in Ancient Egyptian Society. Meryt, a woman in her 30s, sat quietly in her small room. It wasn't large, but spacious enough to let her savor the peace of solitary moments. Though she lived within a formidable ancient society like Egypt, where power was clearly stratified and a woman's status was shaped by family ties, Meryt felt forgotten. She had never married, had never had children, and in society's eyes that kept her outside the circles of power other women could enter. But Meryt was not like other women. She understood that in this ambitious world, family and children were not always the deciding factors of power. Egypt did not belong only to young, beautiful women standing behind pharaohs. It also belonged to women of intellect, persuasion, and estate management, women who could wield authority without producing heirs. Sitting by the window, the soft late afternoon sunlight touched her face. She watched the Nile meander in the distance and thought about her life. Over the years she had heard countless stories of women who married, bore children, and were celebrated for it. But there were other stories, too, about women like T, who had no family yet managed the pharaoh's lands, and Lara, another powerful woman who could sit in important council meetings though she had no children. From these women, Meryt drew encouragement. One day, during a walk along the Nile, Meryt unexpectedly met T, the woman she had heard about but never seen. T had no family, yet power rested in her hands. She was one of the kingdom's royal asset managers and took part in crucial decisions related to temple administration and strategic planning for the pharaoh. Shy as she was, Meryt could not contain her curiosity upon seeing T, a woman who had found success without a family. T regarded Meryt with knowing, slightly challenging eyes. She smiled and began, "Meryt, you know, I have no family, yet I stand firm in this society. You can do the same without a powerful husband." T's words opened a new door in Meryt's mind. She was not the only one who could succeed without a man or children. T had proven that in Egyptian society, power did not come only from bearing children. It could also emerge from prudence, intellect, and the ability to control property and political relationships. From that day, Meryt chose to begin a new journey. She no longer wished to be ordinary, no longer willing to remain surplus in this society. She started attending court meetings where decisions on royal asset management, the economy, and politics were made. Meryt realized that in ancient Egypt, even without a family, a woman could build influence and secure standing. One of her greatest opportunities came when she was invited to help manage the land holdings of the Temple of Isis. This was a significant assignment because Isis was among the most revered deities in Egypt, and temple administration carried not only religious weight but also political power. Such duties typically fell to representatives of the pharaoh, and being entrusted with them marked a turning point in Meryt's life. Meryt became more than a land steward. She began joining meetings with officials, priests, and military leaders, where she played an influential role in decision-making. She was trusted to oversee an important portion of the pharaoh's assets, including fertile estates and the rights dedicated to Isis. She proved that even without a husband or children, she could stand firm in a society that prized family and offspring. Gradually, Meryt came to see that power did not stem solely from being a wife or mother. It also flowed from intellect, organization, and management. She not only found her place in society, but also began to forge a legacy of her own, that of a powerful woman with no family. Over time, Meryt became an ideal model for other women in ancient Egyptian society, women who did not need to marry or bear children to attain power, and they can impact. She demonstrated that a woman, even without traditional roles, could hold an important position and succeed on her own terms. Part 3. The power system of women in the Egyptian royal court. Meryt stood before the temple of Isis, where sunlight poured over the statues of the gods with solemn grandeur. A light breeze drifted from the Nile, carrying the scent of lotus and incense, rendering the air peacefully strange. She gazed up the stone steps leading into the sanctuary, where priests and military leaders offered devotions. But in Meryt's mind, court politics in Egypt were never only ritual and worship. They were also a strategy for maintaining power. Here, women were not defined solely by childbearing. Those who controlled property, politics, and religion could become truly powerful actors. She had learned much from T, a formidable woman at court who managed royal assets and helped the pharaohs safeguard stability. T had neither husband nor children, yet she held her ground through mastery of finance and land. Meryt began to grasp that in ancient Egypt not every woman was bound by family or marriage ties. They could build personal strength through intellect, control of property, and political authority. That realization clarified the opportunities she might seize to shape influence. In society, Meryt started attending administrative councils of the Egyptian court, where major decisions were made. She was assigned to oversee the land holdings of the Temple of Isis, one of the crown's largest portfolios. This work went beyond the allocation of resources. It required bargaining and negotiation with other powerful families. She realized the post was not mere administration, it was a strategic instrument to expand her reach within the court. One day, in a meeting with priests and women officials, Meryt noticed a stark difference between herself and many other women present. While some were still treated as support staff to the pharaoh without real authority, Meryt was now able to discuss and decide on economic and political questions of weight. It dawned on her that women in Egypt could exercise power not only through emotional ties, but through asset management, temple control, and shaping consequential decisions. She recalled T's words, "Women at this court are not powerful only because of family. They can run everything with intellect and calculation." Meryt understood that although society might undervalue women without families, they could still wield great influence if they recognized their openings and used power wisely. Meryt's role expanded beyond the temple estates. She was invited into councils with the pharaoh, joining discussions on national strategy, economic management, and even diplomacy. She came to see that power did not flow solely from kinship, but from the command of finance, military strategy, and political leverage. Women like her without husbands or children could still stand firm and build authority for themselves. At a pivotal meeting on strategic planning, Meryt conferred with Tia, one of the most influential women in the court, about a diplomatic initiative toward neighboring states. Something shifted decisively in Meryt's thinking. She was no longer merely a manager of land and assets. She had begun shaping strategic decisions that touched Egypt's very survival. She recognized that power was expressed not just through family alliances, but via financial control, land administration, and speaking with weight in high councils. As her grasp of politics and economics deepened, Meryt's influence in court grew. Invitations arrived for deliberations not only on estate management, but on state affairs. She now saw clearly that in ancient Egypt, women did not always have to pursue the traditional roles of wife and mother. Trailblazer such as Cleopatra, Nefertiti, and Hatshepsut had shown that power can spring from intellect, stewardship of resources, and political influence, not solely from marriage and childbearing. As Meryt earned greater trust from the pharaoh and the leadership, the change in her life became unmistakable. Women like her married and without children could indeed become powerful figures in Egyptian society. From a woman with no family ties, she had risen to hold significant sway in managing royal wealth, participating in governance, and helping uphold Egypt's power. Meryt knew she did not need a household of her own to shape outcomes. She had learned that in Egypt, women could be both free and successful through intelligence and leadership. She was no longer simply a woman without a family. She had become a woman of standing, firmly embedded in the fabric of ancient Egyptian public life. Her story is clear testimony that, even without family, Egyptian women could claim power in their society. Meryt had overcome the barriers placed before her and proved that a woman could build influence not only through kinship, but through intellect, financial command, and political authority. Part 4. Meryt, an unmarried woman who found her place. In the hush of an Alexandria palace, Meryt sat alone by a window, watching the sun sink behind distant towers and temples. She had spent a long season searching for and building a place for herself in ancient Egyptian society, a world where unmarried women like her were often deemed surplus. But now, Meryt no longer felt that way. She had proved that a woman could hold power without bearing children or relying on a powerful husband. In recent months, Meryt had taken part in many administrative sessions of the royal court, where Egypt's political, economic, and land management decisions were forged. She was no longer merely a steward of royal assets. She was becoming a figure of influence in matters of state, trusted with major responsibilities from temple administration to strategic discussions on diplomacy and foreign relations. She had moved decisively into Egypt's decision-making circle, in the council chamber where military commanders, priests, and state officials assembled. Meryt looked around and recognized how dramatically perceptions of her had shifted. No longer seen as a woman without family, she was now respected as a true leader. When others voiced opinions on royal asset management or land distribution, Meryt's deep engagement and sharp strategic proposals became a defining presence in the room. At one recent council, Tia, among the most powerful women at court, and now the principal authority over royal wealth took part in the deliberations. Tia was not only wealthy, she was a master strategist in the pharaoh's affairs, safeguarding Egypt's political standing through financial and political control, not merely through dynastic ties. Meryt, I see how much you've matured in this work, Tia told her during an important session as they weighed options for redistributing land. You're doing what very few women can. You need no husband to create power. You've shown that women can stand firm in this society by virtue of intellect and leadership. Meryt met Tia's words with gratitude. They fortified the path she had chosen. She no longer saw herself as expendable. Instead, she had become integral to Egypt's great decisions, someone the pharaoh himself needed to hear before a decree was sealed. Soon after, Meryt was entrusted with another pivotal assignment, overseeing the temple estates of Isis, one of the largest and most sacred cult centers in ancient Egypt. This was far more than administration. It was a strategic opportunity to demonstrate her authority. The temples of Isis were not merely sites of worship. They were financial engines where religious and political power converged. As she took charge of the temple lands, Meryt realized something vital. Power in hand did not end with control of assets. It also required the ability to lead and steer political relationships within the royal household. She saw that, even without a family of her own, she could forge and bind alliances that would protect and amplify her power in the wider society. Throughout years working with Tia and other powerful women, Meryt learned not only financial management, but also political strategy, portfolio stewardship, and the art of making consequential court decisions. She began weaving a network of alliances among officials, priests, and other power holders across Egypt. These relationships did more than bolster her position. They helped her hold steady in a culture where unmarried women were too often dismissed as useless. Meryt now felt, with clarity, that even without family or children, she could shape influence and prove her worth in ancient Egyptian life. She had become a woman of considerable sway at court, and no one could deny her role in crucial decisions on royal asset governance, temple oversight, and political cooperation. Yet she understood that success never arrived without cost. She faced constant challenges from others, some of them women who resented that she had achieved power without marriage or motherhood. Meryt refused to be rattled by rumor or resentment. She knew that intelligence, leadership, and long-view vision were the elements that sustained real authority. Her life had changed. She was no longer a woman without a household, but a powerful presence, influential within the court and respected across Egyptian society. She had, in a very real sense, built a small dominion of her own within a culture that all too often overlooked women without husbands. Part 5. The Legacy of Egypt's Unmarried Women. Meryt stood on the balcony of one of Alexandria's splendid palaces, where the last rays of sunset rippled across the Nile, casting a mysterious glow few could ever forget. She gazed into the distance, reflecting on all she had endured. Once judged by society as surplus without family, without children, she had become one of the most powerful women in the Egyptian court. She had found her place in a world that so often measured women by their fertility and domestic virtues. Since taking on the stewardship of royal estates and the administration of the temples of Isis, Meryt had proven that women could wield authority through intellect, leadership, and prudent calculation. She did more than manage assets. She exerted serious influence in the Egyptian court's most strategic deliberations. Meryt knew that ancient Egypt was not lacking in formidable women like herself, women who did not need a husband or children to build power. She remembered the years when she had been an unaffiliated woman, seen as surplus, deemed without worth in the public eye. But it was precisely wisdom, composure, and persistence that enabled her transformation into a woman of decisive influence at court. Not only did she stand firm, she commanded property, authority, and even helped shape national strategies. Meryt's story testifies to the pragmatism of ancient Egyptian society. Not every woman had to conform to the traditional mold of mother or wife. She recognized that with intelligence and finesse, women could become power brokers without the anchor of a household. She fashioned a legacy of her own, not descendants, but independence and political power she herself constructed. Looking toward the distant temples, she felt a rising exultation in her spirit. She no longer felt surplus. She felt strength and influence coursing through this world. Her reality had changed. She was no longer simply unmarried or childless. She was a woman who could control estates, participate in governance, and hold a consequential seat in Egypt's strategic decisions. She had crossed the threshold society had set for women like her and demonstrated that power need not come from family, but from wisdom, influence, and leadership. Looking back, Meryt harbored no regrets. She understood that ancient Egyptian society did not honor only women with husbands and children. It also revered those who stepped beyond the mold, women who could forge power and legacy on their own terms. She did not need to be a mother or a wife to leave a deep imprint on society. What mattered was that she had used her intellect, perseverance, and leadership to succeed. Meryt's story is also the legacy of Egypt's unmarried women in a society that prized family and continuity. Women without husbands or children could still stand firm and wield great power if they knew how to apply their intellect and leadership. Meryt was not just a strong individual. She became a model for all Egyptian women without families, showing they were not surplus or worthless, but agents of change if they seized opportunities and exercised the power within their reach. Lessons learned. Meryt's journey offers a profound message about women's independence and power. Although ancient Egypt prized motherhood and family, her life proves that power does not arise solely from family ties. Any woman, whether married or not, with children or without, can build her own legacy through intellect, leadership, and public influence. Meryt not only found her place, she became a template for other Egyptian women, helping them recognize that authority is not confined to kinship networks, but can rest on wisdom and management in the realms of economy and politics. From her story, we learn that power and respect need not depend on family connections, but on one's capacity to lead, independence, and creativity in any circumstance. Women can become remarkable leaders not because they belong to a family, but because they use their abilities to create change and influence in society.